I love farming, it's in my blood. I don't think many people would go into farming if they hadn't been born to it. I spent my childhood here. It's everything to me. It's not only I don't have a job, I've got a way of life. It's been in the family, yeah, 3 generations. 1938, my grandparents moved here to Muscliffe Lane. Yeah, and my father was one. Yeah. My grandparents, my grandmother was 97 when she stopped coming out in the greenhouses. But they do nothing but hard work. Like I said, my grandfather was 7, getting up to milk cows when he was 7 years old. He didn't go to school. His father went off to war and keep the farm going. The boys all got up and milked. It was either that or... When I just left school, there's a thing called push hoe, which you push and it's like a knife gun underneath and it knocks the weed out. But I'm there with my father and my grandfather, and I just thought there can't be many people who do that type of thing, and it means everything. Brings a tear to me.
Jim is the owner of Berryhill, a local Dorset farm, where he's a firm believer in locally sourced produce. In the past few decades, food has been travelling further and further to reach our kitchens. The food that ends up on our plates may have travelled as far as 2,500 miles from the farm, 25% further than in 1980, which is why people like Jim hold such value in local produce.
Without the need for local produce, we wouldn't exist anymore. We're a small to medium farm. Without people wanting to know where things come from, where they're produced, how they're produced, and also they get the added bonus with us that it's fresh, and obviously the lack of miles. No, we'd have flourished 30, 40 years ago. We're a dying breed. The whole issue of we do it by hand, where most of these things would be done by machines. But then there's the spell of mid-spring, early summer, where there is not much produce. I'm going into asparagus, but I haven't got enough yet. Asparagus takes 4 years from seed to get a crop. So my first crop I got last year, and I realised there was nowhere near enough to go round for everybody. So I put another lot. So in 2021, I'll have enough.
As supermarkets and manufacturers prefer to order in bulk from predictable commodities, local farmers can be forced to sell to an international market just to compete, often meaning countries import and export the same product. This is known as a food swap. It's an incredibly inefficient flaw in national trade and explains why some product labels might identify several different countries of origin. Countless countries, each with unique pesticide standards and laws. In fact, 90% of conventionally grown strawberries have pesticide contamination, with some linking to cancer, hormone disruption, and neurological damage. Apples have traces of up to 5 different pesticide residues, but avocados are the best crop, with only 1% testing positive for pesticides, which explains why people are becoming more and more interested in local produce and Jim's organic veg boxes.
We started doing the veg boxes 4-5 years ago. It was because our core of our business up to 6 years ago was the high street, the vegetable shops on the high street. They have gone there. The last recession knocked them out, and we thought, well, where do we go now? And first of all, it was farmers markets where I was doing 3 or 4 a month. Now I do 3 or 4 a weekend. I started with 1 vegetable box, and now I'm up to sort of 80 a week. But yeah.
The problem is, markets like those that Jim supplies for struggle to get the publicity vote over supermarkets, which prevail through ease and consistency, despite the higher quality of local food.
We started making fish cakes 15 years ago, and from the time that it's come out of the sea, from the time it's actually served to the customer, it can be a matter of hours. We process it and it's at the farmers markets within a day. And we don't use any preservatives, no additives, as it always used to be, and as it should be really, a pure product.
I think local produce is, for me, is about having a direct relationship between what you eat and where it comes from. I mean, I know somebody who produces eggs for Waitrose in Cornwall, and all her eggs go all the way to Northampton and back down to the Waitrose in Cornwall, which is completely ridiculous to me. But if you sell locally, then, you know, like Clive with the eggs next door, or myself, that we're all people who are living in a small area of Dorset, or sometimes, you know, the fish guy comes from Brixham or whatever. But, you know, we're not far away, and we're producing food for people locally, and that has to be a good thing.
For local producers like Jim, door-to-door distribution is crucial. Getting to know the customer alongside supplying local restaurants is part of what feeds the business. But the industry for local produce doesn't stop at what grows in the ground. Dorset Oysters focus solely on shellfish farming, and unlike finned fish, farming shellfish requires no additives, feed or medicines, as oysters gain all they need from the sea. In fact, oysters generate their flavour from the minerals in the area they're grown in. Some are sweet, some salty, and some are even fruity and melon flavoured.
My name's Alex Reeks, and I'm the manager here at Dorset Oysters. We're a wholesaler of shellfish, so it comes from the raw product straight from the sea. We bring it in here, it's trayed up, which would go straight into the tanks, which in then turn is purified. Now you have a set period for purification for different species. Oysters is anything from 24 hours to 42 hours, and clams, shellfish is roughly around 38 hours. So when we want to ship our oysters out, we have our tanks there which we have to pump all the water out of the tanks. When they're completely empty, we bring our oysters out, which are in the trays. We spray them off with a jet washer so they're all nice and clean. They're ready then to be boxed up. Then they're ready to go to the wholesaler, which is who we mainly deal with.
Head chef Phil Jenkins works at Storm, which both Dorset Oysters and Berryhill Farm supply for.
You know, when you have a good product on your doorstep and it's going to cost you a couple pound more to get it, rather than get it, you buy it on your doorstep, because it's the responsible thing to do.
Phil starts his prep for service, using all the fresh local produce, including Jim's veg and Alex's oysters. Aside from the better flavour, another benefit of buying local produce is that if we all sourced our food from a farm within a 20-kilometre radius of our home, annual environmental and congestion costs would fall by £2.1 billion. The first of Phil's orders tonight is Oysters 3 Ways, an expensive and luxurious dish. Although this was not always the case. In fact, oysters in the 19th century were consumed in abundance and cheaply made into steak and oyster pies. Around the 1880s, roughly 120 million oysters were consumed in Britain annually, making them an endangered species, which explains their price today. Phil's next few dishes include the delicate fish plaice and skate. While Storm gets its fish locally, it's still a fact that over 80% of fish resources are overexploited. So in order to help sustainability, it's best to shop locally and boycott supermarket fish, meat and veg.
One thing you can say is there's no bad energy in fish that's wild or line caught. The thing's been living in its home. It's happy. It doesn't know it's being, it doesn't know it's in dirty water or anything else. So there's no bad energy from eating a well-sourced bit of fish. Whereas you go to a supermarket, you buy the steak, that's cow's been on antibiotics and raised in horrible conditions, even free range. If you look at how cows shouldn't be, bulls that we eat for steak shouldn't be these tame. They have their nuts chopped off. If you let bulls go, they'll have big horns and they'll be fierce, So they're not even the natural animal anymore. But the energy in it is bad. And when you become knowledgeable about food and you've tasted wild game, and then you taste a supermarket steak, you can almost taste like the sadness in it. That's why KFC tastes so good. It's the misery. Yeah, that's what tastes. Gets the misery. People get addicted to the misery, and they, yeah, give me that misery. That's what tasting the chicken's pain. The biggest crime in the food industry, I would have to say, is probably the restaurant industry itself. From what we've come to expect, well, by fast food chains, obviously, you have to say it is corporations that is the biggest crime. Everything's about the money. You're making cost and stuff. Eventually, the soul comes out of it, and your product becomes generic. People get used to a certain standard of food, and you have this idea of your head of what is good food, what is good service, and you're like, oh yeah, I got that to me in 5 minutes, that was great. But do you know the reason why you got that to you in 5 minutes? The whole commercialization of food and the way chains are just taking over the place. If you care about food, you boycott chains, pretty much full stop. And there's a lot of places that are chains that are disguised as nice little restaurants, but they're chains, you know.
In modern-day society, where everything is so accessible, it's easy to forget that produce doesn't just come from a supermarket. There's a journey from produce to plate.
Nature's good, you know? Nature's good.
Phil's last touch with nature on his evening menu consists of his signature gluten-free and vegan brownie with avocado ice cream.
Food is medicine. If you just think about food as fuel, what you will start to taste, your taste buds will change and stuff. We used to eat roots that we don't eat anymore. Our taste buds used to be set up for bitter stuff, real bitter, harsh tastes that we can be adapted to. Now we're so poisoned with sugar and our taste buds are so diluted that every time we have a meal, we have to like it. It has to be salty or vinegary or all these things. If you just think of food as fuel, which is hard to do, you can get good food in your body.
Perhaps it's time, then, to remember that food grown locally from natural sources causes less pollution, less waste, supports local producers, boosts local economies, and of course, tastes so much better.
Food is life.